You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
We are now recording.
All right, and I will start yapping at you, which it's funny. Somebody's comment on the Winter Wondercast was, hey, that was pretty good. I don't know how Michael doesn't punch you in the side of the head. Which I thought was funny. I was like, yeah, I get a little yappy sometimes when I'm excited. I know that. I'm aware of my shortcomings.
It's funny to me in part because one of my writer friends, like one of my favorite writer friends, posted on Facebook the same day you told me that she had gone for a walk that day and had listened to the Winter Wondercast audio version on that walk, and just like how she had this huge smile on her face the whole time because she just like really loved it. And it was like really, I was really flattered by that. And this is somebody who's like, her writing is really good and she's a really cool person. And so it's just like, I felt extra validated. It was really wonderful to hear.
It was a lot of fun. And this is the first thing we've done since then. And we recorded that actually a week or so before it came out. So we actually haven't jumped on Zoom. Behind the curtain, we record on Zoom to
like literally everyone else in the world.
Right. To talk about stuff. And sometimes we gave ourselves a little break because we needed it because we almost killed you with the fall stuff.
There's a lot of editing to do.
But we are back. This is probably the first episode that folks that may find out about us after this Thursday at the WRAL Voters' Choice Awards, which what is that, in a week?
Yeah, it's Thursday of next week.
Yeah, it's in a week.
From our perspective, everybody else listening to this will probably not have that perspective on it.
Right. But hopefully likely this will be the first thing that people hear, anyone that we meet at that, and be like, hey, you should listen to us. So hello and welcome. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I am your other co-host, multi-award-winning novelist, Michael G. Williams.
And welcome to Arcane Carolinas. This is your first time joining us. Sometimes we do supernatural stuff, lots of folklore. Sometimes we do natural phenomena. Sometimes it's just urban legends. And today we're going to talk about a modern urban legend about natural phenomena.
No way. Okay.
Yeah.
Hit me with it. That sounds like a great combination.
I feel like the last time we did something like that, it was cryptobotany. Yeah. This is not that.
Okay. That was really fun because there were like people in the comments on Facebook who were like, I'm going to have a cryptobotany storyline in my D&D game now, and stuff like that. So that was really, really could.
I mean, they can borrow this topic as well. And it is, I wish I had like a megaphone or like a echo thing to be like, the Raleigh Weather Dome. So the Raleigh Weather Dome. Are you familiar with the urban legend around the Raleigh Weather Dome?
I have never heard the phrase Raleigh Weather Dome, much less any legends about it.
So it's a thing that is discussed on the internet in comment sections and in blog posts. The question is there a geographically narrow, invisible force field of influence that prevents Raleigh and immediately surrounding suburbs from getting the worst of storms?
Okay. I've got a lot of different reactions to that right out of the gate, but by all means, go ahead. That's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, so there's a lot of personal accounts and radar images, even like Doppler images, that seem to support this idea that Raleigh has an invisible force field that fans have called the Raleigh Weather Dome, which is why sometimes it'll be like snow in Cary, but nothing in Raleigh.
Okay, interesting.
And we've discussed microclimates in the past.
Absolutely.
We have talked about that in episodes like the Brown Mountain Lights, which is not the result of a microclimate.
No.
We have talked about the unique fauna of Okanichi Mountain, which is the result of a microclimate.
Yeah.
So because we're kind of treating this like, hey, it's us, you might not have heard other episodes, we'll define what a microclimate is, as defined by the stronghold of truth, Wikipedia.
The last bastion of, I don't know, truth telling. It is definitely not that.
But the definition of a microclimate there works. It's a localized set of atmospheric conditions that differ from those in surrounding areas, often only slightly, but sometimes substantially.
And examples being, if by chance you've ever paid attention to the weather forecasts in San Francisco has something like 40 different microclimates, and literally the high on a given day will be different in one block from the next block over. Durham, I live in Durham. Durham also has arguably a couple of microclimates. There's a big line down the middle of Durham, sort of east to west, and you'll have really different weather on the north side of that than you do on the south.
And it can include things like temperature, obviously, but it can also include light, wind speed, and moisture differences as well. And this is a thing that I really liked when I found this definition, is that to your point of them being able to be very small, it can be applied to small areas or areas as large as several square miles.
Okay.
So it varies. And I think the urban legend of the weather dome kind of falls into this type of thing.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I would think it's basically a bubble of weather that differs from the weather around it, localized to the Raleigh area. I like Weather Dome. It's also called the Raleigh Bubble, force field. Somebody made a really funny picture and posted it on Reddit of like Darth Vader using the force to move a storm front away from Raleigh.
That's really funny.
But is it real is the question, right? Is this urban legend based in fact?
Right. Yes. That is my first question.
Well, in 2018, a WRAL meteorologist was asked about it whilst doing a guest appearance on a radio show.
No way.
Yeah, it was like a sports show, and he was like doing a guest appearance, and somebody was like, "Hey, what do you think about the Raleigh Weather Dome?" And he was like, ugh. And he just sounded exasperated.
Mm-hmm.
But he acknowledged that in this region in particular, weather does seem to vary a lot from zip code to zip code.
Yeah.
He chalked it up as a perceived phenomena, likely attributable to weather banding, like summer thunder showers.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the map and there's bands of it that go across. And like, if you've ever been in one, your neighborhood can get soaked and the town over can be bone dry. He attributed it to that. And then people taking instances of that and using confirmation bias and being like, no, it's the weather dome. But there is an environmental term, like this is like a real thing called an urban heat island.
That was going to be one of my questions.
It's when a more densely populated area is significantly warmer than the areas around it.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is directly able to be attributed to the people that live there and their activities.
And urban planning and all kinds of things.
Right. And these heat islands are affected by proximity to different types of land cover when you talk about urban planning. So barren land causes it to be hotter, whereas vegetation tends to make it cooler. So a city with more planned green spaces will be less susceptible to becoming an urban heat island, which sounds like a lovely dance night at some club. Like, come on down, it's urban heat island night. And it's just like...
But for real, I've read studies about exactly that. And in fact, cities that go out of their way to create more green space, A, tend to experience more rainfall themselves and cooler temperatures. But B, cities that are sort of the next step over in the usual direction of weather patterns in their region will also gain some of those benefits.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point that not all cities are urban heat islands. To your point, there's planning. It also, the background climate of the larger area where it sits is an influence. So like, if you're at the beach, it's going to be different than if you're at the mountains. Obviously, that's going to play into it. Recently, within the last year, it was January of 2022, the newspaper, The Indy, which did a lovely piece on us. Thank you, Mike V and The Indy. Yes.
It was a great article.
They talked to a National Weather Service meteorologist named Jonathan Blaze about it, can I just say how great that is of a name? Jonathan Blaze.
He does kind of sound like he's got a secret identity as a superhero that's somehow weather related.
It's blazing hot out. Like some stupid catchphrase like that. Like,
right. Yeah.
He said there is no scientific reason to explain why folks insist that Raleigh is immune to extreme inclement weather. He brought up heat islands and he said that someplace like New York or Los Angeles or something like that, yeah, sure. But Raleigh, no.
I am inclined to agree and to disagree. There are parts of Raleigh that are big stretches of pavement. Mm-hmm. And the line that is described through the middle of Durham, that's the Durham Freeway. and the associated differences in urban landscape versus suburban landscapes. And you get a lot more suburban on the south end of the Durham Freeway, a lot more urban on the north end of it. So I don't know. Raleigh's a pretty big place geographically.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, this is a guy from a national service. This isn't like the WRAL guy. This is, National Weather Service. So
sure.
He focused on snow a lot because that's what you'll see people talking about online. We didn't get any snow because of the weather dome. And he said there's geographic factors that lower the probability of snow inside the Raleigh area. That being that the Piedmont region as a whole sits between mountains funneling cold air downwind and then warm water in the Atlantic, where I didn't know this. Apparently there's a current off the shore of the Carolinas where water temperatures can stay at 70 degrees even in winter.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the article said. That's what the National Weather Service guy said. So I was like, okay. And this is apparently incredibly uncreatively named the Mix Zone.
The Mix Zone sounds like it's the name of the bar at that dance night.
Yes, the party that night, it's Urban Heat Island, but come on down to the Mix Zone. And they serve like really wacky cocktails in giant glasses that are very colorful.
Oh, yeah. Totally. The kind of stuff that sane people do not order.
Maybe straws that like curl, like little curly straws.
Yes, absolutely. Little curly straws and a lot of little paper umbrellas down there at the Mix Zone.
So here's a direct quote from Blaze. The natural tendency is for us to be in the mix zone. That often results in us being on the edge of snow and people being bummed out about that.
That makes a lot of sense. I am not an expert, so I'm not going to argue against that at all, because that makes a lot of sense. And these are people who are trained scientists. They know what they're talking about.
And he said that, like, here's the stats, right? A declining snowfall of the last few decades. It's like verifiable, like you can see. So that makes people feel like, oh, we're getting less now than we used to. And it's because of the bubble. Like, it's not necessarily because of the bubble. It's because we're just getting less snow.
Yeah, it's not because of the bubble. It's because of climate change.
The bubble.
The bubble is the pathological ideology in which people who think that climate change is not happening live.
But what about the radar, Michael? What about the screenshots of the radar, Michael?
Okay, let's hear about screenshots of the radar.
He had an answer for that, too. He said that the nearest local radar tower is in Clayton, which is about 10 miles south of Raleigh. And the way weather radar works is that the beam points, this is terrible radio, but I'm gesturing with my hand, at a slightly upward angle, meaning the further away from the radar, the higher in the sky it detects storms.
Okay. So if you imagine yourself like holding a laser pointer and you're pointing it not at the wall opposite you, but like a little bit higher up on that wall.
Right. The stuff immediately above you is going to get skipped. So lighter storms that sit higher up in the sky won't show up necessarily on the radar, while it still shows storms in the broader area.
Oh, so when people look at radar maps, they actually are seeing a circle around Raleigh.
Right. Sometimes that's why, because it's the storms is sitting too high in the atmosphere.
It's not an effect of there not being anything up there. It's an effect of the technology not revealing what's up there because it's right above them.
Isn't that convenient?
I will note my husband has many times in a ranting tone referred to Big Doppler because he's convinced the entire weather forecasting industry is a scam. So, it is awfully convenient.
Very convenient. Maybe too convenient, Michael. And that's where we go into full-blown Arcane Carolinas territory and the conspiracy theory that Raleigh-Durham International Airport is practicing weather control.
Okay. You actually just answered the question I was about to ask, which was, A, what on earth conspiracy theory could there be about this? Because where would there be profit motive?
Have you ever had a flight delayed because of weather at RDU?
No.
Well, good for you. I have. It happens.
Sure.
That was not planned. I thought you were going to say yes. That was not response I was expecting.
I realize that I'm about to curse whatever next travel I take, but I've never had a flight delayed by weather.
Yeah, don't. Now you can't fly ever.
No, never.
No,
it's okay.
Just retire from flying. But no, it happens. Like, it happens. Flights get delayed because of weather. RDU is not controlling the weather. If they could control the weather, they wouldn't delay flights.
Yeah, obviously. But no, I've never had a flight delayed by weather, especially not at RDU. I've never even seen bad weather when I was flying out of RDU.
Really?
Really?
Wow. Maybe I just absorb all the rain luck for flying. I don't know. There's a much more plausible theory. It's not plausible, but I can see where the person was coming from. It's anecdotal. This is a comment from the internet where somebody was like, oh, I grew up in a town that had an airport and we had a weather bubble. It's from all the planes taking off and landing constantly. And I'm like, no, So let's look at O'Hare. All right.
Yeah, if that mattered, then Chicago would basically be a tropical paradise.
Right. Which is funny because we're going to be doing something about Chicago in an upcoming Destinations episode. So that's why O'Hare immediately jumped to mind.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing that I found while, reading up on the Weather Dome and the various theories. And it's just a fun one. But I didn't realize that weather modification is really a thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not what the HARP conspiracy theory people.
Yeah. No.
And it's not chemtrails. It's not any of that stuff. All that stuff is garbage.
Yeah, but no, it goes back decades and is legitimately studied for agricultural purposes and military experiments and cloud seeding, basically dropping a bunch of silver iodide into a cloud may increase precipitation.
Mm-hmm.
Zapping clouds with lasers to get stuff to discharge. One experiment that I really liked to try to get clouds to open up was they would fly a drone in that was basically like a giant taser drone, and it would just zap inside the cloud and try to electrically charge the cloud.
Huh. I imagine that was to attempt to get particulate matter being carried aloft by the cloud to clump together through static forces.
So again, we do not share notes and none of this is scripted.
Yeah.
I really like the taser drone, but the coolest one is a polymer bomb. They flew a bomber into a big storm, way above it.
Yeah.
And dropped a bomb that would detonate inside of it, loaded with some kind of polymer that can hold some ungodly amount, 15 times its weight in water or something, each particle. So they just blasted this stuff to basically try to absorb the cloud and make the cloud fall out of the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
So it made it all clump together, create the super dense cloud. It's
wouldn't you then just basically get polymer slurry hitting the ground?
I can't imagine that it was good. They did it once and we're yeah, we're not doing that.
I feel like this is what they used to dump on people on you can't say that on television.
Yeah, the green stuff.
Yes, exactly. But I also want to point out that at Urban Heat Island Night, down in the mix zone, the signature cocktail is obviously the polymer bomb.
If we lived in a world where the things that we spoke on this show came to fruition, there'd be a lot of really stupidly named bars and a couple awful bands, one or two good ones.
I would like to visit that world very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly.
Yeah, with a controlled exit.
Right, I already have to live in my own head. I don't need to live in my head as the world around me.
Yeah, no. Mm-mm.
So yeah, they have varying degrees of success, but there is weather modification, apparently sometimes with disastrous results if areas aren't equipped to handle increased rainfall. But again, none of that. I would bet the farm that none of that is an explanation as to what's going on with the Raleigh Weather Dome. And
I agree wholeheartedly.
I would instead say that it is an amazing urban legend with some confirmation bias going on when the radar looks funny. And I really hope that people continue to persist that there is an invisible bubble of Raleigh weather.
See, my immediate thought at the very idea, well, first I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, as you were describing this, it sounded to me as though there are people out there who think that there is a literal, physical, maybe metaphysical force field that is generated in order to prevent storms from approaching Raleigh. Are there people who actually think that?
No, I could not find that. I like that. I'm sure that if we asked her, somebody's going to email us and say that they believe that now. You might have just willed that into existence.
I look forward to what we will say about that email to each other.
But the biggest conspiracy theory that I saw was that RDU has weather control machines.
Wow, I wish. Anybody who's like had to sit through a dry spell in the Carolinas would look at that and say, God, please have weather
It just
control.
occurred to me, we know somebody that worked at RDU.
Yeah, totally.
That's funny. We should be like, where do they keep the machines?
He even listens to this show, so we might hear something from him.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he'll tell us they exist just to mess with us.
He'll have an elaborate story about them.
And the fact of the matter is that Raleigh does get extreme weather. Like there are ice storms in the aughts, and this is going back a ways. But do you remember the 1988 Raleigh tornado? Did that make it out to you in the news?
No.
Okay, I didn't know if it was like statewide news. It was a huge deal. Like my parents were shocked that I slept through it. And the next day we went out to the Burger King drive-thru for some chicken bundles. Do you remember Burger King chicken bundles?
No, I'm afraid I do not.
Okay, I'm gonna talk about them. So this is the part where people are like, I don't know how we just punch him in the head. I thought they were called chicken minis, but while looking this up, because I was like, I want to read more about that tornado that I remember. And I distinctly remember going to the Burger King drive-thru to get these little tiny chicken sandwiches, and they came in like a sleeve. It was like we'll put a link to the ad in the show notes because I found the ad on YouTube for it. They are the best tiny sandwiches.
Are they basically chicken sliders?
Yeah, but they were really good. I don't know, man. It was 1988. This was novel and new and amazing. Probably laden with chemicals they can't put in fast food anymore.
Well, that was an era in which fast food places were trying a lot of new things to see what would stick.
Yeah. Go to Burger King drive-thru to get some chicken minis, chicken bundles the day after the tornado. My parents are telling me, oh, there's a big tornado. Oh, there's a lot of damage. Oh, that's why the trees are messed up. The Kmart was gone.
Oh.
The Burger King was in the same shopping center as the Kmart. Got my chicken sandwiches. Kmart was rubble.
Gosh, that's awful.
And there are a ton of pictures available. Again, I pulled some links and we'll have them in the show notes where you can look at pictures from this. So that was my first, like, as I'm like reading on this, I'm like, Raleigh gets extreme weather. And then I remembered a big ice storm as well. Mm-hmm. And I swear we are honored and happy to have been nominated for the WRAL awards. We have no direct ties to WRAL, but I'm about to reference WRAL again. The ice storm was so intense that it brought down a radio tower that WRAL owned.
Oh, wow. Was that the 2000 ice storm?
No, this was 1988.
Oh, okay.
89. Yeah. No, the 2001 was its own whole mess of stuff. I'm going way back because I thought you might remember the tiny chicken sandwiches.
No, I'm sorry. I don't think they made it to my neck of the woods. I don't think they were trying new things at the Burger King where I grew up.
Well, they
were probably standing out front, fending off the truck that carried the new ideas into the town.
Well, anyway, point is, I remember extreme weather in Raleigh. So I like the idea that there's a force field now.
Yeah, like my first thought, other than that question of like, do they mean a literal physical force field like in science fiction? But my other first thought was Hurricane Fran, 1996. I lived in Chapel Hill at the time. I lived here during a hurricane that wiped out tons of stuff. And for days and days, all of Raleigh had no power. There was like basically at the time, the old Fayetteville Street Mall, back when Fayetteville Street in Raleigh was a pedestrian mall, that was like the 4 blocks in the middle of downtown Raleigh that still had power because that was like right next to all the state government buildings. Otherwise, Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill and basically everything for, 100 miles in any direction had no power for like a week. So it was really bad. And clearly, if there were a force field, then it was off that day.
Force fields need breaks too.
That's true.
Force fields rights. It's like workers' rights, but for force fields.
Force field operator goes on vacation for one day, and this is what happens. But then also there was like Hurricane Fred, in like 99, and then there was Hurricane Isaac in like 2003. There was the big ice storm in 2000, or a big snowstorm rather, in 2000. That was just a complete mess. Then there was the huge ice storm in, I don't know, like must have been 2003, where there was, again, ton of the triangle had no power for a week. Lots of people with no heat, lots of people with nothing for no water, no heat, no power, nothing for a week. It was really rough. There's a lot of examples of if there were that sort of thing, then those things would not have happened.
But it's fun.
It is fun.
I like this one.
It would be delightful if it were true.
The Raleigh Weather Dome. Someone's going to write in and say like, no, it only applies to snow.
We live below the snow line most of the time,
In the mix zone.
Also climate change. And also like when snow gets to us, generally speaking, if it gets to us, then it's a bad enough storm that we get a fair amount and it's memorable. We're not the sort of place where you get a little snow a lot of times. You get one big snow every couple or 3 years.
I think we got a dusting last year, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can think of times when we've had just like a little bit, but
like last year we got a dusting. I don't know that we got any the year before, but the year before that, we got a pretty good one. Was it 3 or 4 years ago?
Yes, because I believe that was the time that I got so stir crazy sitting in my house. Must have been longer ago than that I walked like 4 miles in the snow to a coffee shop that I had called ahead and made sure was open because I just like had to get out and see.
I remember that. All right. I remember you saying something about that. Yeah. If it's the same one that I'm thinking of.
It must have been like 2017 or something.
That's funny. Well, that's pretty much it. Arcane Carolinas. We'll be back with much weirder stuff next time. But I figured it's the winter. I really have wanted to talk about the Raleigh Weather Dome for some time. And sometimes you just got to do one that's just a silly urban legend. So that's what today's was.
For many years, this was the week of the year when this area would get its big snowstorm if it was going to get its big snowstorm. And instead, we just had a day where the high was 70. So if there is a weather dome, then it's doing its job as far as I'm concerned.
It must be really big and cover most of the East Coast.
Yeah. I'm all for it as long as it gives us a little bit of false spring.
Right. Well, cool. Thank you very much. Play us off.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.